I feel like this movie woke up a hater sleeper agent in me that I have never experienced before. And this is my third time watching this movie. So if I am filled with rage on a third watch, it's not looking good. Hi, I'm Bobby. Welcome to Culture Kitsch and welcome to another episode of Recap Review. This is where I take you through a movie, give you some fun facts, give you my opinion, give you my analysis, and we just have a good time. I don't know if I'm gonna have a good time, but I hope you have a good time watching me not have a good time, because today we're talking about 2023's Saltburn. Saltburn was directed by Emerald Fennell and produced by Margot Robbie. It is produced by Margot Robbie's production company, Lucky Chat Productions. It stars Barry Keoghan, Jacob Elordi, Archie Madekwe, Richard Grant, Rosamund Pike, and Alison Oliver. And I gotta say, like, right off the bat, like, that cast is majorly stacked. If you have not seen this movie and you're slightly curious about it and you don't care about any of my critiques of it, the cast is the reason to watch this movie. Like, everyone like turns in a phenomenal performance, and it just feels like they have a very keen understanding of their characters. So like, when I'm critiquing this film, cast mark safe. Like, it's not their fault that they were given a so-so script. Anyways, Saltburn really made a big splash last year going into this year for a multitude of reasons. The Jacob Elordi of it all, the Barry Keoghan sickohood of it all, the fact that it is gorgeously shot, like, it does look very great. But more than anything, Saltburn was known for a lot of controversy from both people who really loved it and people who really did not like it. It was recommended to me, like, a lot of people that I know saw it and they were like, oh my gosh, Bobby's gonna love this, Bobby's gonna love this because it's for the horny sick freaks, or so I thought. I watched it and I was like, y'all don't know me. Y'all don't know me at all. Without further ado, let's just jump into the story. So we begin with the first of what feels like 37 fan cam montages in this film of Jacob Elordi's character Felix. I kid you not, I think I counted 5 montages or just like straight up fan cams that take the place of any real, narrative structure or anything like that. I am not personally someone who just dislikes montages. Like, I know some people really don't like them, especially as like a narrative device in movies and stuff. I don't really mind them. Like, if they're done well, like, I don't really care. It's a good way to kind of like show the passage of time in like a fun way, and kind of give you like the top notes of something, and then it eventually is like expound upon like after the montages. But the problem with this movie is that it does treat montages as the story device with no expounding upon that happens afterwards. I get we are supposed to be enamored and obsessed with Felix in the same way that Oliver is, but it did not take 5 fan cams to get there. We were at Oxford University. That is where Oliver goes to school. The character of Oliver, played by Barry Keoghan, and he is very much so like kind of a loser with a capital L. Loser! That is what he is. He makes friends with another kind of social outcast by the name of Michael, but you can tell that Oliver pines for more. And we see in kind of just small glimpses that he always just kind of catches the eye or the gaze of Felix. Like, he's always like kind of looking at him whenever he sees him. And we don't really know if Oliver knows who Felix is before he gets to Oxford. Like, we don't really get that information, which for where the movie ends up is kind of important for the motivation of the character. So we could assume at this point that maybe he just sees Felix on campus, gathers a lot of information about him, and then really becomes enamored with him. Like, there is a strong streak of obsession in this film, especially with Oliver to Felix. And it makes sense, like Oliver says in the beginning, like, what's not to love about Felix? But he like starts out really kind of becoming enamored with him. Oliver has met this character named Farley, who is the Archie Madekwe character. And Farley is, for lack of a better word, a bitch. He is so mean. He's kind of that like nice, nasty type of vibe, would tell you like, oh, wow, you look really nice today. And you don't really know if he's being sincere or being kind or like genuinely means that. So they meet and I think they both have the same like advisor or tutor or whatever. Farley belongs to like the upper echelon of the social class of the school, where we then see Felix. So one day Oliver is biking to class, and this is where he actually like meets Felix for the first time, because Felix's bike has gotten a flat tire and he can't bike his way to class. So Oliver's like, I'll give you my bike, like we're in the same college, so I'll see you around so you can return my bike to me. They have not had a conversation with each other yet, but Felix has absolutely no idea that Oliver has existed before this point. So when Oliver says like, we're in the same college, I'll see you around so you can return my bike to me, Felix is like, no way, really? And the look on Oliver's face when he's just like, oh, okay, so you don't acknowledge me at all, you've never seen me before, took me out. After this little encounter, Oliver is out at the bar with his friend Michael, and Felix sees him and like calls him over and is just like, oh my gosh, like he was my savior, blah 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 blah. This is when we see that Farley is with Felix, and the reason for that is because they are cousins. And so Farley is already kind of like clocked what type of time Oliver is on. Like he's very much so a character who is like constantly telling Oliver like, you don't belong, you don't belong, you don't belong. So Felix calls Oliver over and it's just like, oh my gosh, like this guy's the best, blah 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 blah. It very much so is reminiscent of like when a popular kid would like embrace the nerd, and you don't know whether they're actually being kind or if they're being like, oh, this is my friend, the nerd, ha ha ha, like look at me doing charity work. Like we don't really know if Felix is really being genuine with Oliver just yet, because if Felix keeps around company like Farley, the possibility of it all being kind of this ruse is like looming overhead. Oliver, very excited to be embraced by Felix, comes over, they start drinking, and they're all like taking turns buying rounds for the whole table. It's like 12 people at this table. And so it gets to Oliver's turn to like pay for a round, and he's like, no, I really shouldn't, like I gotta go, like I gotta go do homework. And Farley's like calling him out and it's just like, oh, like you can't leave when it's your turn to pay for the round, like that would be fucked up. And so he like gets the whole group to be like, yeah, come on Oliver, like what the fuck, blah blah blah. So Oliver goes up to the bar and he's like very tepidly like, I don't really have the money to pay for all of these drinks. And Felix, being the like sweet soul that he is like comes up and he brings some money and he's just like, oh, I think you dropped this, and I'm such a nice person, I was gonna like steal this money from you, but you should have this. And Oliver's like, oh, I'll pay you back, and Felix like,
I know what you're talking about, mate.
So Felix spots him the money, and it's like a very kind gesture. So like we're establishing that like Felix is pretty genuine with his maybe interest in a friendship with Oliver. So that only draws Oliver in more, and like it makes him even more enamored with Felix as a person, as an idea, whatever it is that he wants from Felix. Now we're at the second montage. This is like 15 minutes in. We've already gotten 2 montages of these characters. So this is the second montage to establish that like Felix and Oliver are starting to hang out more. Felix constantly invites Oliver into his friend group, and no one else in the friend group really embraces Oliver. Like everyone is pretty put off by him because he's like a pretty off-putting kind of guy. But Felix doesn't like see that. Like he really, embraces him as a friend. This is when we get a little bit of backstory on Oliver. He's kind of this like very unfortunate person. He didn't have a really good home life. He hasn't really, made friends very easily. Like he's a bit of a loner. Like he's kind of an outcast. Felix is obviously very moved by this. Like Oliver says, my parents, they're on drugs, they're dealers. My dad is constantly like, on benders and stuff. And my mom is like constantly drunk or, high or whatever. Like they're not very good parents. I don't really have anybody. Like I'm kind of just like out in the world by myself. And so Felix feels very moved by this story, and he's just like, like fuck him, whatever it is. Like he starts to very much so like kind of take in Oliver as someone who he can, I guess, take care of in a way, or embrace like with his friendship, like offer his friendship as something for Oliver to cling on to. Oliver is now abandoned his friend Michael, and Michael then tells him like, oh, he'll get bored of you soon enough, and then says like bootlicker. Already we are now planting the seeds of like class and dealing with class and like class consciousness and everything like that within this film. One of the things that has come up about this movie is the rolling debate over whether this movie is meant to be a commentary on class. And there has been a lot of contention from people back and forth saying like, yes, it is. It's supposed to be a commentary on class. It's not a very good one. And the people in opposition to that are like, no, it's actually not supposed to be a commentary on class. Like, that's not what it's doing. And I am of the mind that it very much so wants to be a commentary on class, but just never goes there. We get to towards the end of the school year, Felix and Oliver kind of get into this like a little bit of a tiff or a fight, and Oliver brings up working class people like can't afford to be this filthy, and he's like in Felix's room and is like picking up stuff and like just talking about how like Felix is just this rich and like, you know, privileged dude. He lives like this because he knows that someone will come and clean up his messes. And like Oliver, as assumingly like a working class guy, doesn't live that same thing. And he's chastising Felix for that. And so Felix is just like, fuck off. Like, you know, like I'll clean it up, whatever. And again, planting a seed of class commentary that never really goes anywhere. So at this point that Oliver has received word that his father has died, and so he's like kind of really going through it. Felix is there for him. That kind of rekindles their bond. Felix might have kept some distance from Oliver before, with everything going on, like how his friends kind of think Oliver is weird, and then also like the whole like, you know, rich people act like this, rich people act like that thing, like that kind of kept Felix at bay. But Oliver kind of needing someone because his father had died, that brings Felix back into the fold. So we're at the end of the school year, and there's this tradition that Felix has in his family where when someone dies, they write their name on a stone and then like throw it into a river or whatever it is. So Felix, in an attempt to kind of make Oliver feel like a part of something, you know, feel like a part of a friendship or a part of a family, like be there for him, he wants to do that tradition with Oliver for his dad. It's at that point that Felix is like, why don't you come to Saltburn? Like, why don't you come back home with me and spend the summer with me and my family? That's what kind of kicks everything off. They go to Saltburn. Oliver arrives to Saltburn, and it is this like gorgeous, beautiful manor. I just want to take a pause to say that like accent wise, Jacob Elordi is so good. I've heard him do a couple different accents up until this point in his career, like the accent that he has in Euphoria, the accent that he has in Priscilla, and then the accent that he has in this film. And I have to say, like, he does really good accent work. Like, I'm not sure which British accent he's supposed to be doing specifically. Like, I know it's very posh and like sound, but it's very good knowing that he's Australian. Like, it's very, very good. And in Priscilla, where he's supposed to be doing kind of like a Memphis, Tennessee, like southern accent, he does it really, really well. And the fact that he was prepping for those roles kind of at the same time is very impressive, because he was doing Saltburn during the day, and then at night he would prep for Priscilla, because I think 3 weeks after Saltburn finished wrapping, he went to go and do Priscilla. I was very impressed by really all the accents in this film. Archie Madekwe, like, he is from the UK, and his American accent I thought was very, very good, especially for the specific type of American accent that he is conveying, like the American person that he is portraying. This like nice, nasty, very rich, entitled. It's just like an unassuming plainness to the accent that still feels elevated in the way that like an upper class accent might sound. So all the accents were very, very good in this film. Felix is like going through giving Oliver the tour of the house, and he's just very like casually mentioning like Shakespeare's folio here, like Henry VIII portrait there, like this, like he's mentioning the belongings of kings and queens that just like exist in this house, and they just have like, it should be in a museum, but it's just in their house, like priceless art, like a bunch of stuff that would sell for millions of dollars, and they just have it like decorating their house. Like that's just their reality. Oliver then meets Felix's family. So we meet his mother, who's played by Rosamund Pike, and his father, played by Richard Grant, and then his mother's friend, Pamela, who's played by Carey Mulligan, and his sister, Venetia, who's played by Alison Oliver. Seeing the zoom out of this family, who are like eccentric, kind of like very, very posh, very, very rich with a capital R, wealthy, affluent. That is them. They don't just have like a little bit of money. They are money, pretty much. They are a very weird group of people. I'm not gonna lie to you, but they are so funny. And I was watching a video by Jordan Teresa. Her video on Saltburn from a couple of months ago was very, very good. She talks about how this movie wants to be a comedy and a thriller, and you know, this like class consciousness thing. It wants to do a lot of different things, but what it does do well is the comedy. Like when it pokes fun at the rich, like it is funny. Like I found the humor in it. It's when it tries to do the everything else that I'm like, oh my god, like you don't need to do that. Like, please, like, oh my God. When he meets his mother is like gossiping to her friend about this tragic story that Oliver has told to Felix. So like everyone already has the tea on Oliver before he even gets there. And they have already taken pity on him. They kind of treat him like this like trauma porn entertainment almost. Like he's so tragic and he's just had such a like hard upbringing, and it's not enough that he has had a troubled upbringing with a broken family, but he's done all that and be poor. Like, oh my gosh, like that's the vibe that they give off to Oliver. Like they kind of treat him like this charity case. They see him as a spectacle, but also just like a form of entertainment. Like you would hire like a clown for a kid's birthday party. Like that's kind of what Oliver is to this family for the summer. And if we find out that like Oliver's not the first person that Felix has invited back who's fulfilled this role in their dynamic. Carey Mulligan's character Pamela does not get much in the way to do in this film, but what she does get to do is so funny. Like when she meets Oliver, she's just like, hey, like the limpest arm and hand, like just offering it like, hey, and she's just so like just so in her own world, doing her own thing in the way that like the friend of a rich person would. Like not a care in the world, doesn't realize that her rich friend is in a way like kind of making fun of her and making fun of her lifestyle and like talks behind her back constantly, but like the proximity to wealth is enough that she kind of just like puts up with it, or just truly is that oblivious that she just doesn't know. And Elspeth, Rosamund Pike's character, is so good. Like she is what this movie needed in the way of comedic relief. She just says so many things that are just unabashedly awful, like terrible, but she delivers it in a way that is so funny. And as someone who likes like the Real Housewives franchise, she could like go with the best of them of any of the franchises.
Tell me about your mother. How is she bearing up? Still drinking?
Stop.
Oliver then finally meets Felix's sister, Venetia, and she's a bit of a kind of weird, eccentric type. She's just kind of out in the garden in the middle of the night, and Oliver goes out there to talk to her, and she's kind of like sussing him out. She's like, you know, oh, I liked you better than last year's. I think the film means to convey her in a much more manipulative and sinister way that just doesn't really read. I think she's just like, she's the type of person like all of them, which is just that she's a bit shallow and driven by status and things like that. None of these characters besides Oliver ever come off as truly awful people. Like, the closest we get is Farley, and he's just kind of mean. In this film, that very much so wants to be a part of the, like, eat the rich genre. If we're meant to see these rich people as just truly heinous and awful people, this film never makes an attempt to really show them in that light. We just see them as like a little bit mean and a little bit shallow, which is to be expected. I think if you're watching an Eat the Rich film, it is a base level requirement that they're probably a little bit inauthentic because of how wealthy they are. But that's about as far as the movie goes, with really seeking to kind of villainize the rich to make it to where what Oliver is feeling about them is justified, I guess. Which does bring us to the third montage. And we're at 3 montages at this point in the film now. Like, just showing what they kind of spend their days doing, and like, you know, how they're getting along and things of that nature. And you can see that Oliver is still trying to further ingratiate himself into their culture and their, you know, way of doing things, and is trying to further infiltrate the ranks pretty much. This is when we get to the first kind of like sicko scene of the film. Like, this was the scene that everyone talked about before the movie even came out, was just like, oh my gosh, this is the most depraved thing I've ever seen, blah 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 blah, whatever. Voyeur Oliver strikes again. He's looking at Felix through like the little crack in the door while Felix is like taking a bath, and while Felix is in the bath, he is filing his taxes. The taxes are filed in the water. And so Oliver comes in and like, he's just like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, brush my teeth or whatever, as Felix is like getting out of the tub, and the water is draining. And when the water drains out of the tub, Oliver then gets into the tub and he starts lapping up that bath water that Felix was just in, that he just, you know, did the deed in, and he's lapping up that water like it's no tomorrow, just like rubbing his face in it, like slurping it up. And it was like, it is depraved. Like, it's a depraved thing to do. It is a objectively crazy as hell thing to do. But to me, it was just more like, in the context of it, it's so funny. Like, it was so funny. It is like definitely showing how obsessed with Felix Oliver is. Like, he is very much so obsessed with him, and again is like really towing that line. Does he want to be him? Does he want to be with him? What does Oliver want of Felix? If you're willing to slurp up someone's bathwater, like, that is a level of need and desire and lust that is not most people don't really engage in or experience in with someone that they just kind of like that is deep. The list of people whose bathwater I would slurp up like that is like 5 people deep. I'm not above it. I'll do it, whatever. Listen, whatever I decide to do with my Thursday nights is my business. Oliver begins to learn a little bit more about the inner workings of the family, in that he begins to learn more information about individual family members. Mainly from Elsbeth, he finds out some information about Venetia. Like, Elsbeth basically, like, this is her daughter, so she's just like, you know, like, Venetia has like, you know, kind of an ED problem. She is a bit of a masochist, like, you know, she's got no sense of control, things like that. Like, she's just airing all of Venetia's dirty laundry to Oliver, who is an outsider. Like, he is a stranger to them, but he's just like, you know, taking it in and listening, and he's beginning to co-opt and adapt the language of these rich people, in that they veil their like real kind of nastiness in this sheen of saccharine, but completely ingenuine care and concern, really. And he tries his hand with that with Elsbeth, with talking about Pamela, and like, Pamela is Elsbeth's friend, and Oliver is like kind of talking about her to Elsbeth, and Elsbeth's like, you know what? Yes, I actually thought those things. And like, what is more of a connective experience than one person talking about someone else that the other person like secretly doesn't like that is a form of kinship that cannot be broken. Oliver is improving his station with Elsbeth in talking about Pamela, who like Elsbeth I guess secretly doesn't really like or like doesn't really care about all that much. So later that night in the garden, Venetia is again out. She just kind of goes out in the middle of the night. Oliver goes to find her and he sees her, and for 2 seconds this movie became Secretary, and for 2 seconds I was having the time of my life with this scene. I'm not gonna lie to you. Oliver kind of turns into this like Dom pretty much, and he's just like, you know, tomorrow morning like you're gonna eat and you're gonna eat all your food and you're not gonna throw it up, and you know, whatever it is, like you're basically like kind of, it's really, like I said, it's so reminiscent of Secretary in the scene where James Spader's character is telling Maggie Gyllenhaal's character that she won't be self-harming anymore. Like she's like, you will never do that again, and she just like, it's enough for her to just be like, I won't do that again. It's what this scene is with Oliver and Venetia, and he just is really domineering and like just assumes complete control over her in this way, and so she's just like kind of at his whim pretty much. And so then they begin to, you know, engage in a little bit of whatever. She's on her period, he goes down on her, does whatever. But the scene, very hot, don't care. The experience of watching this film for me was a swinging pendulum back and forth of I like this movie and I don't like this movie. And up until this point, I was like kind of swinging to maybe I'm not really enjoying myself with this film. But then this scene swung me back to like, actually, maybe I am enjoying myself. Like, let me lock in real quick. Like, it is committing to being kind of freaky in a way that is refreshing, especially in the contemporary landscape of movies that like claim to be so sicko forward and freaky and oh my gosh, this is for the freaks, this is for the weirdos. And then you watch it and it's just like, okay girl, is it though? Is it really? What I do applaud Emerald Fennell on in this film is that there is a certain streak of eroticism that the film does and performs, I think, rather well, better than I think some of its more prominent. I think Barry Keoghan, it made me want to see him in a real deal erotic thriller, because I think there's something there. There's certainly something there. First of all, I saw it with Druig in The Eternals. Shout out to The Eternals. Shout out to my familia who love The Eternals. But I saw it with how him and Makari were getting down. So I was like, Barry, let's get you in an erotic thriller. Let's see what you can do, actually, because I'd like to check that out. I need for my sisters, Rita Carpenter, shut your ears, girly pop, because I have to say something kind about your ex. But yeah, he kind of threw down in that point at that moment, and I quite enjoyed it. I'm not gonna lie to you. While they're out in the garden doing that, Farley is watching them and he sees them. And so the next day, Farley has told Felix what is going on. And so Felix is kind of like miffed with Oliver because he's like, you know, why are you hooking up with my sister? Like, that's so weird. Like, I don't like that. And then Oliver lies to Felix, and it's just like, no, like, Venetia came on to me. Like, she came on to me and I didn't want to embarrass her. So, you know, I kind of just like, you know, like we embraced or whatever, and it might have looked like we were hooking up, but I just didn't want to embarrass her because she was coming on to me so strong. And Felix tells Oliver that the person last year, Eddie, also kind of had a thing for Venetia, and that caused Eddie to have to leave. Oliver, in an effort to kind of save himself, he was just like, no, like, she came on to me and that was all she wrote. Like, sorry, like, I was just trying not to embarrass her. And Felix is like, you know, well, why didn't you tell me that she came on to you? And he was like, well, you know, like, it would have been more embarrassing if I told you, but I was trying to protect her. Meanwhile, he was the one that was finger blasting her in the garden on her period. Oh my God, my mom watches these. I have to think about that sometimes. Sorry, Mom. So now it's time for yet another narrative seed to be planted into this film that will never bloom, never blossom, never develop. Felix and Farley are having kind of a tit for tat situation because Farley is basically telling him like how uncomfortable it is having to come to Felix and his family for money. He's just like, do you know how uncomfortable it is for me being who I am, like being black, pretty much the only black person in this family, having to come and beg you guys for money? Like, do you understand like how, uncomfortable that is for me? And it is very interesting. Like, it is incredibly interesting and would have been incredibly interesting to investigate a little bit further with Farley, like being black in this affluent British family and having to come and ask for money and like what all comes with that and like the weird dynamic of it. But it's only this one time that we really kind of see it, and everything that follows with Farley feels counterintuitive to this scene. Like after this point, like it just kind of felt like, oh, we should bring up that Farley is black and the rest of this family is white, and like, that's weird, right? But then it never really goes anywhere. We don't really do anything with that, which is so frustrating. It's just like, this movie presents itself as a better movie than it is. This movie either needed to be a lot more serious than it was or a lot less serious than it was. But it operates in this weird middle ground that is like, it's frustrating. It makes it a frustrating watch. They have that conversation, and that's like kind of the end of it, with Felix kind of giving shades of that he looms money over Farley's head, and he's just like my father has done like more for her than other people would, so like be grateful. Again, like we are meant to understand that this family is like really, really awful, and them being rich doesn't make it any better, but we don't get any full robust shades of them being truly terrible and doing very heinous things. And like this is like the closest that we get to that, but even then it's just kind of like, okay, like they're a little bit shallow and a little bit mean. That's just another dropped story beat. RIP. So now we're at this party that they're having with this other family called the Henrys, and they are doing karaoke, and this guy is very terribly singing Low by Flo Rida. Timeline wise, we are kind of in and out of time. I think it feels this is supposed to be like set in like 2006, 2007, but like I don't think Low came out until like late 2007, 2008. It's not important in the grand scheme of things. It's not. I'm not gonna say that like this movie is bad because its pop culture references aren't very accurate, but like it wouldn't be me if I brought up the fact that this film's pop culture references are not very accurate. Sue me. Farley and Oliver kind of have like a nice nasty confrontation where Oliver says, why did you tell on me and Venetia? And you can see that there's this kind of like power dynamic struggle that's happening with them, where Farley has always kind of maintained an upper hand on Oliver because Farley has always come across and explained that he sees right through Oliver. Like he sees right through the ruse. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't belong there. And Farley sees right through that. And in this moment, Oliver, in whatever plan it is that he's trying to execute, is like trying to get the upper hand on him. And so he has overheard this conversation that Farley and Felix had earlier and is like, if you ever need help, if you ever need money, like I'm sure I could put in a good word with Felix and see if, I can help your family out and everything like that. Point to Oliver, he's the one with the upper hand. Farley then gets up during karaoke and puts on the song called You Pay My Rent or Pay My Rent by the Pet Shop Boys. And it's just like, this is a song that Oliver knows very, very well. Come on up, Oliver, and sing your song. He's just like kind of, like singing it or whatever. And then when he gets to the chorus of like, I love you, you pay my rent, everyone in the room kind of gets quiet because everyone in the room has clocked that Oliver is the poor entertainment of the summer. Like he's the show, he's the charity, he's the show, he's the entertainment for this upper class group. And everyone in the room kind of clocks it, which again, if we were meant to see these people as truly heinous and awful and deserving of everything that comes to them at the hands of Oliver later in this movie, they shouldn't have like all gotten quiet. They shouldn't have all gotten like, oh, that's weird or that's mean. You shouldn't do that. Like, they should have all been like, yeah, whatever, you pay my rent, whatever. Like, they would have been laughing at him, but they don't. Everyone stops, and even Felix chastises Farley, and it's just like, that's fucked up. Like, why did you do that? So again, it's like, you want this to be something that it's not, and versus you just making it something else. You want it to be something that it's not. You want it to say something that it is not saying. Oliver is like, you know, Farley, you should come up and sing. This is your song. And Farley like happily like gets up and like is singing like, I love you, you pay my rent, and this dancing. And again, it makes everything of that scene before where Farley brings up the racial dynamics of being in this family and being in the position to ask for money, to in the next scene happily shucking and jiving and singing about, you know, I love you because you give me money. And it's just, I'm like, okay, I guess it was just a little bit dissonant. And I don't think it was a thing where you're kind of like juxtaposing he feels that way but acts another. Like, it feels tonally like inconsistent, you know what I mean? Like, if he really felt that way enough to bring it up to Felix when they're having that conversation about money, in the next scene he's happily making a spectacle of himself singing this song in front of the people who do give him money, and it's just like, including the person he was just arguing with in the scene before, and it's just like, okay, whatever, yeah, whatever. So this whole exchange upsets Oliver greatly because he lost control in that point, and so he loses control even more because he then punches the mirror. And the movie does visually, like I said, some of the strongest elements of this movie is its visual storytelling. There's a lot of like fracturing with Oliver being seen in like multiple different angles of a mirror, or like a mirror that's like fractured, and you know, whatever, like seeing multiple versions of himself, showing that he is full of these multitudes, and like that he is not just what lies on the surface. There is more that lies underneath him. The next morning, Farley gets kicked out of Saltburn because it's discovered that he was sending emails to, I guess, this like appraiser for some of the items in the home, and was like trying to pawn them off for some money. And so he gets kicked out. And then it's also when they find out that Pamela is dead, but they don't like treat it with any gravitas. When they talk about Pamela being dead, Elizabeth says like, oh, she'll do anything for attention, including being dead and dying. Like that's what is hilarious. It's now Oliver's birthday, and for his birthday, Felix thought it would be a good idea to take Oliver on a bit of a road trip, and where they're going is to Oliver's house, because Felix, who means well, again, is just like, your mom called and was trying to wish you a happy birthday, and she sounds like she's on the mend. She seems like she's doing good. So like, maybe in this time of grief of your father, like you should go to her and like have this moment. Like, Felix is trying to facilitate in earnest a good kumbaya with Oliver and his mom. Oliver's now panicking, freaking out, because he's like, no, I can't go back, like I can't do that. And Felix is reading it as like Oliver is nervous because of how, you know, fractured his home life is and like how terrible it is. But Oliver is panicking because his whole situation is about to get turned upside down, high up on the ceiling, inside out. It's about to get messy for Oliver. We see that this is like a very nice house. Like, it's not like Saltburn, obviously, but it's like nothing like Oliver described, which was like squalor that he was living in. Like, it's nothing like that. Like, he's like, his family has done pretty well for himself. So they get to the house, knock on the door. Who shows up? Oliver's very caring and loving mother, who has never had a drug problem, and his father, who is alive and never done drugs. So we find out that Oliver has been lying this entire time, and he has been lying to Felix about his parents being drug addicts, his father being dead, him having no siblings. He actually has sisters. He's been saying that he's had this like really rough upbringing, but by the looks of it, he clearly has not. Like he clearly comes from a perfectly middle class, like done well for themselves family. Like they talk about like, yeah, we would go to the Mykonos every single year. We don't really do it anymore because the kids are grown now. They're clearly very loving. And then the parents are talking to Felix and they're just like, yeah, like Oliver's told us that he's this top scholar at Oxford. And Felix is like, a top scholar? Really, Oliver? So we're coming to find out that Oliver has been playing this game with both sides of his life. He's been lying to Felix, saying that he comes from this like poor, destitute family. His parents are drug addicts. His father is dead. He's a only child. He's had to grow up with such traumatic experiences. And then his parents are thinking that he's this top scholar at Oxford, when the truth is he's a loner loser. That's all he's got. That's the only truth of what the situation is. Needless to say, Felix is pissed when they get back in that car and they go back to Saltburn. And Felix is like, after your party, you need to get the hell up out of my house. Like, you need to go. Because why would you lie to me like that? Like, that was so nasty, so rude. Why would you lie to me like that? And I know that some people in critique of this film were like, oh, I saw that twist coming, blah, blah, blah. I will say I was legitimately like, I think that was pretty well done. I don't think a lot of other things were well done about this movie as far as like the reveal of the true Oliver. But I thought that was like a pretty well done reveal of him like lying to the extent that he was lying. But the problem in that is that it's not like he comes from a still poor or working class but like nice family, like to where none of the things that he said were true, but he still is of a much lower social status. Oliver comes from a like middle class family, like perfectly middle class, vacations every year, you know, like 2-story house. So money is not really a problem for Oliver. And the issue that comes with the class element of it all is that money is not really a problem for Oliver. So having this like class dichotomy thing and then eat the rich type of narrative when one of the characters is like middle class, it makes it the friction is like a little bit interesting, versus I think they could have done it and it been a little bit more effective if you had it to where like Oliver wasn't lying about not having a lot of money. Obviously he doesn't have as much money as Felix and his family. Like, of course he doesn't have as much money as them, but he either needed to be like very rich but of a lower social class status as Felix and his family, or needed to be even like poor, like even lower on the social class hierarchy rung, because him being in the middle makes a lot of what happens at the end of this film feel strange and odd. Like, it just, the motivations don't feel all that clear. And the movie is dancing with a lot of different elements that ultimately just don't always feel very harmonious at the end of the day. So they get back to Saltburn, and now we're at the night of the party. And this is like the beginning of the end, well and truly. So they're having this party, this massive party that's themed to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Elspeth is in this gorgeous gold gown that I was like, oh, stunning. I love it. The party is happening and Oliver's kind of like sulking because Felix won't talk to him because of the very elaborate lie that he has spun about his entire life to him, obviously. And he doesn't know anyone else at this party. Like, they threw this big ass party for him, but no one knows him, to the point where when they sing happy birthday, they're like, happy birthday to They don't know who they're singing happy birthday to. And Oliver is just like he's so upset by it, you can tell. So at this party, we see who's there, but none other than Farley. Farley is there again. He goes on this whole tirade and rant about how this is my house. I'll never be kicked out. Like, I belong here. You don't belong here. He's just like, yeah, so good luck trying to get me kicked out of somewhere where I was invited to. And it just shows that he'll never really have like a full, I guess, upper hand over Farley, I guess, in that way. So they like let him back into the fold, and it's not really that big of a deal. And later into the night, Oliver finds Felix, who is having relations with a woman in the maze. And it's at that point that Oliver is like, he's drunk, and he's just like, we need to talk. You need to talk to me, blah, blah, blah. Like, and it just shows like the peak of Oliver's obsession with Felix, and is just like, you need to talk to me, blah, blah, blah. And Felix is like, you're scaring me. You need to go. It's getting a bit weird at this point. Please leave me alone. Like, you make my blood run cold. That's what Felix says to him. The next morning, panic ensues because no one can find Felix. No one knows where he is. They haven't seen him since the party. And it is found out that Felix is dead. He's in the maze where Oliver last left him the night before, and he's dead. Performance-wise, again, this is a scene that was so well executed. It was so well done. Again, visually, it's very stunning. And performance-wise, like, especially Richard Grant, when he's talking to to Felix's dead body.
Felix, darling, where's your jumper? Where's your jumper?
And it's like very, like, it tugs on the heartstrings. Like, everyone is like kind of locked in with how sad they are that Felix is gone. Like, Felix is kind of the sunshine of this group and the best amongst them, and now he's no longer there. And so after this, it's kind of when it just all kind of rolls downhill. Oliver's still there, again, trying to act like he belongs there. And Elspeth and James are kind of just like, they've already compartmentalized the emotion of mourning their son, and they are just kind of like just talking through it as if nothing has happened. And still, you can tell that grief is just ravaging this family and running through this family. And none of them really are processing it well. Elspeth and James are just like talking through it. Farley is like cracking up, losing his mind. And Venetia, she's damn near catatonic. And Oliver is just kind of like there, still playing the game. But it's like the game is now gone to a place where it doesn't need to go because Felix is dead. Like Felix is no longer there. Like something has happened to him. And it's just, it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. Farley calls out, like, why is Oliver still here? He needs to go. Like, why are we acting like him being here is helping? It's not. Like, he doesn't need to be here, needs to leave. And so then Oliver, with the final upper hand on him, says that, like, oh, like, I saw you blowing rails at the party, and basically, like, insinuating that Farley gave Felix drugs, which ultimately like killed him. And so James kicks out Farley, and it's just like, oh, you're lucky I won't get the police involved in this, like, get out. So then the funeral happens, and they are all mourning him, obviously. Oliver is beside himself crying, and it leads to the point where we get to the final sicko scene of the movie, where Oliver begins to mourn Felix in his own special way, which does include lying naked as the day he was born on top of Felix's freshly dug grave, and proceeds to have relations with the dirt on the gravesite. He is fornicating with the gravesite where Felix's body is. I literally wrote down in my notes, I know grief is crazy, but it's not that crazy. There's just a point where Venetia is talking to Oliver, and she's just like, why are you here? You're a stranger to us. You need to leave. Like, you're constantly here. You're the reason why Felix is gone. Like, she lays into him. And she's like, you're sick. You're a creep. He's not showing her that he's phased by what she's saying. But what she's saying is absolutely true. Like, it's absolutely true. The next morning after that encounter, Venetia is found to have taken her own life in the bathtub where they were just talking. And so from then on, it is this thing where now Elspeth has grown codependent on Oliver being there. James has to like beg Oliver to leave Saltburn because he's like, this is not good for my wife. This is not good for me. Like, it's best if you go. And it feels like James assumes something about Oliver and all of the things, because it's like, boom, his son is gone. Boom, his daughter is gone. Like, what's going to happen next? You need to go. So James literally has to like pay Oliver to leave Saltburn. So some years roll by, things have gone on. In that time, James has taken his own life, and it's now just Elspeth. And she goes to this coffee shop and sees Oliver there, who's like now older and whatever it is. And she's just like, oh my gosh, like, you should come and come and visit Saltburn with me. You know, like, the coast is clear now. Like, you can come up and we can, you know, be friends and commiserate in our grief together and everything like that. And so that brings us to present day, where throughout this movie, Oliver has been talking in voiceover to someone. And it turns out that someone was Elspeth, who is like in a coma, unconscious. She's been overtaken by an illness. We don't really know. And in that time, when she's become infirm, Oliver has assumed control over Saltburn. And so she's literally like on a breathing tube, and he's telling her his grand plan, that this was all like the demise of Felix's family, the Caddens, has all been Oliver's doing. That's the second big twist. Everything about this has been planned by Oliver to a T. He punctured a hole in Felix's bike in order to get Felix to stop and for him to offer the bike. It's Oliver who was the one who framed Farley for the like trying to sell off their wares in order to make some money after that whole situation. It's Oliver who, you know, leaves the materials that Venetia uses to take her own life. It's been Oliver all along. Like, that's the situation. Like, that's what he's trying to say. And he's like, and now culminates with Elspeth, who is on this breathing tube. He's her like caretaker, and he like rips out her breathing tube and, you know, was waiting for her to, you know, die essentially. And it reveals that he's been behind this the entire time. Which, sure, like, by this point, with everything that's gone on, it has both felt like, sure, this was his plan all along, but also not, because everything that's gone on, through the reading of it being something that Oliver planned the entire time, when you think about it a little bit too close, it falls in on itself completely. Like, the whole idea of Oliver meaning to kill Felix, again, kind of caves in on itself when you see how he was behaving with Felix, like, from the jump. You know, like, at what point has his relationship with Felix progressed to the point where he feels like he needs to kill him, I guess? And again, it is the thing of like obsession and an addiction and all those things, and Oliver not knowing whether he wanted to be with Felix or be Felix and all those things. I get that. I totally understand that theme. Broy Deschanel made a very good video kind of about this film and the problems that it has, especially when compared against a movie that it is very similar in everything to, which is The Talented Mr. Ripley. They were explaining that it would have been better for us to know that Oliver was trying to mastermind getting Saltburn and killing this whole family in order to get it from the jump. When it's a last act reveal, you then paint everything that you've seen in the context of that. And like I said, some of those parts don't make sense for Oliver to have like masterminded from the jump. You know what I mean? Like, from Oxford. Like, did he know about Felix before getting to Oxford? Did he start masterminding this plan after seeing Felix one or two times on campus and then deciding that he was going to kill his whole family to assume ownership of Saltburn? Like, it's certain points where when you try and paint your main character as this mastermind genius who executed this plan that in turn led to the execution of this whole family, that like, some of those things just stop making sense after a while. When you get to the reveal that like Oliver meant to do all of this stuff to get Saltburn in the end, I've just found myself being like, oh girl, okay, like sure you meant to do this the whole time. Sure, this was the plan all along. Like, you had planned this down to a T all along. Like, sure, that was what you meant to do. Got it. Whatever. Elspeth dies, and Oliver is now the, I guess, sole beneficiary of Saltburn, and he celebrates his victory over this family by dancing butt naked to Murder on the Dance Floor throughout the house, which apparently took 11 takes to perfect. This is a movie that I think I really want to like. Like, this is my third time watching it. I saw it in the theaters. I saw it again with a friend, and then I saw it again for this video. And it is a movie that when it's having fun, I'm having fun. Like, when it chooses to be kind of like this fun, kind of sexy, a little bit weird comedy, it's great. But when it's trying to be a little bit more serious, it's not. And like I said before, I think this movie either needed to be a lot more serious or a lot less serious. It's this weird middle ground purgatory that it just eliminates any sense of effectiveness in the narrative that it's trying to tell. Like, it needs to either have put its foot way more on the gas or ease up a lot. Like, I think if it was like, if it knew it was supposed to be like fun and trashy and whatever throughout the entire thing, then I would have bought into it a lot more. I think I would have had a lot more fun with it. And like I said, when it is having fun, when the movie is choosing to have fun, like, I am also choosing to have fun. But it is a movie that so desperately wants to say something more than it is saying. And I think what has bothered me about the discourse of this movie in the years since it's come out is that some people, in an effort to defend it, are trying to overlay a movie that it is not, trying to overlay themes that are not there, trying to assign story beats and payoffs that never happen. The idea of Saltburn is much better than the execution. The movie that Saltburn thinks that it is a much better movie than the one that we actually got. When you look at it for what it actually is and use the materials that it offers you, it crumbles under the weight of its own potential. And then you just kind of are left with an okay movie. And that's Saltburn, unfortunately. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all the fun things. So always be sure to share with me what you'd like to see from me next. And until then, I'm Bobby. This is Culture Kitsch. I do not have an outro yet, but I will see you next week.